Well, hey everyone, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us online. I'll tell you about a guy named Dr. Ira Byock. He's a physician and kind of like an expert on dying. For decades, he was a hospice doctor and like an expert in end-of-life care, palliative care. Anyway, after a bunch of years of watching people deal with the end of their lives, he noticed that lots of folks had regrets about things they should have said to people that they care about along the way, but they never said it. They never did. And he noticed that consistently there were four things that people regretted not saying. Not saying, "I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, or I love you." And so he wrote a book called The Four Things That Matter Most. And his message was really simple. You don't have to read the book. The message was we should really say those things to one another. Like before we die, and before we're dying, and before they're dying. And probably the sooner the better. And I think that's good advice. I think it's biblical advice. And for what it's worth, it's my observation that people put off saying those things for a whole host of reasons, and then often they're very good reasons too. They're valid, but they still aren't good enough reasons because, and again, just my observation, but while those conversations sometimes go great and sometimes go terribly, people are always glad they've had those conversations, regardless of the outcome. People, they never seem to regret saying, "I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, or I love you." So I'm going to say just a little bit about each of the four. First, from Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 and 24. These are Jesus' words. He said, "So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, and go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God." So the first one of the four is "I'm sorry." Two very, very important words. But I actually want to add a third. You should say, "I'm sorry, I," and not "I'm sorry, you." Saying "I'm sorry, I" sets the stage for a genuine apology that takes ownership for the failure or the shortcoming. Saying "I'm sorry, you," as in I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry you were offended, or I'm sorry you think that, whatever, is just setting up for blame shifting, and it'll probably just make things worse. Also, a real apology it's always more than just words. It has to include a genuine offer to make amends. If your apology is, "Hey, I'm sorry I cost you $1,000, well then it needs to come with a plan to pay them back. As we just read, Jesus said, "Go and be reconciled," not "go clear your conscience" with meaningless platitudes. Like, we have to make amends. And I recognize that in many cases, and maybe most cases, that's actually not possible. Something has been lost or taken that can't be restored, in which case you're just asking them for their mercy. And by the way, if you're a Christian, you must forgive those who have hurt you. It's not an option, but that doesn't mean that we can demand forgiveness from someone else. So an apology is always a request for someone to show mercy. It can never be a demand, even if you're talking to another Christian. So look, if you're not willing to make amends, or you're inclined to make demands, or you're not willing to take real ownership, then you probably need to spend some time with Jesus before saying "I'm sorry," because your heart's probably just not in the right spot, and you'll probably end up having to apologize for your apology. So we want to say "I'm sorry." We want to say it in the right way. The second thing is "I forgive you." As I said just a moment ago, unforgiveness isn't an option for Christians. Colossians 3, verse 13, Paul writes this: make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. It's really vivid and clear. So not optional for us. Now, listen to me very, very closely about that. Forgiveness means, literal definition, forgiveness means to cancel a debt. It's offering them mercy in a way that essentially says, I won't make you pay for what you did. That's what it means to forgive. It doesn't mean less than that, and stay with me on this, it doesn't mean more than that either. So to clarify, here are a few things that forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not the same thing as reestablishing trust. You might trust that person now, and you might not. That's another matter, actually. Forgiveness also is not the same as restoring the relationship back to where it was before. It might be a good idea to do that. It might be terribly unwise to restore the relationship where it was before. That could be even dangerous. Forgiveness means you won't be looking to collect the debt that they owe you. It doesn't mean that it will magically become like nothing ever happened. And by the way, if the person who's seeking your forgiveness is demanding that from you, demanding that forgiveness, and demanding that you pretend that nothing ever happened, or it's not real forgiveness, then you probably shouldn't trust that person. You must forgive them, but again, that doesn't mean trusting them. That's another matter. Also, forgiveness is not pretending that you're no longer hurt by what happened. In many cases, the hurt is an ongoing reality. Forgiveness doesn't mean that all things are all better now. Life's way too complicated for that. The real hurts, the deep hurts, they take time to heal. Some things never heal all the way. Sometimes the wounds that have healed have a way of cropping back up again. So saying, I forgive you, doesn't mean everything's hunky-dory and fine, or that the wounds aren't still raw, or that everything's back to how it was before, or that you trust them again. It just means that you won't make them pay, and that you'll release the resentment. So look, you don't have to pretend things are back where they were. You don't have to trust someone you shouldn't trust, or make yourself vulnerable to someone unsafe. And you don't have to pretend that you aren't still hurting, but you must forgive. So that's the second one. Okay, the third one is thank you, saying thank you. Fortunately, this one's a lot easier. This one's a lot less complicated. This one's actually fun. So here's the advice. Make a list of people you're grateful for, and then be specific about what they have done to enhance or enrich your life in some meaningful way, and then go tell them about it. And it doesn't even matter how. Write it down, shoot a video, call them, send a text, knock on their door if you have that type of relationship. There are 1,000 ways to do it. Some of them are better than others, but they're all good. It is such a gift to show your gratitude. And what's best is, and don't miss this, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not as if you only have a few thank yous that you can give in this life, and then when you're done, they're all gone. The truth is the opposite. The more you give gratitude, the more you have to give. And just literally everyone's better off because of it. I got a text this morning from a good friend who just reached out to say thank you. And seriously, it was so encouraging and powerful and good. I just want to encourage you to take that step. That's number 3. And the fourth one is to say, I love you. This one's also simple. That doesn't mean that it's easy. I don't want to imply that it is. Sometimes it's hard. And by the way, I'm not really talking about romantic love here, although at some point you got to take your shot, man. And if that's where you're at, go for it. But what I'm talking about is people who you cherish, who mean so much to you, but you've never told them. Or maybe it's been a long time because maybe it's been complicated for a long time. I'll say this though, guys. Love is a feeling. It's an emotion. That's true. It is. But I mean, you know this. It's so much more than that. And from a Christian perspective, I'm not sure that love that remains unexpressed is really love at all. We demonstrate and communicate love, and if we don't, maybe it's just not love. Let's read how John talked about it. This is 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 to 12. He writes this, "Dear friends, let us continue to love one another, for love comes from God. Anyone who loves is a child of God and knows God, but anyone who does not love does not know God, for God is love. God showed how much he loved us by sending his one and only Son into the world so that we might have eternal life through him. This is real love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us, and he sent his Son as a sacrifice to take away our sins. Dear friends, since God loved us that much, we surely ought to love each other. No one has ever seen God, but if we love each other, God lives in us, and his love is brought to full expression in us." And again, we are that final expression, the full expression of the love of God extended through us. And it's got to be expressed through us. I don't want to be dramatic. I know that expressing emotion is really difficult and complicated for a lot of folks for a whole host of reasons. But still, to love someone and not tell them, to have that gift that's free for you to give and could be priceless to them, maybe it's cruel not to give that gift. So I'll plead with you to do so. So anyway, I think Dr. Bayok was really onto something here. Those four statements really matter. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. And beyond that, there's something about saying those things that demonstrates wisdom and kindness and just the fruit of walking with Jesus. And also, saying these things can be a catalyst that restores relationships that really, really matter, or it deepens relationships that are good but could be really great. I have a friend who talks a lot about eulogizing the living. We have a real tendency to tell people that we love them and we're grateful for them and we forgive them, to say all these things that really need to be said, but wait until we're eulogizing them as we stand over their body in a casket. Eulogize the dead. It's a good practice. But let's eulogize the living. Let's have the wisdom and the kindness to say the things that need to be said while the opportunity is still there. So that's the encouragement. By the way, we're coming up on the new year. I want you to think about these four things. Maybe this could make your list of resolutions for you to start the year off right by being brave and selfless and saying what you need to say. So put some thought and prayer into that. I love you guys. Happy New Year. I can't wait to see you next week. By the way, we're back to our regular schedule where we'll be worshiping in person at 9:15 and in person and online at 11. That's next Sunday. We'll see you then.